This is the Triumph T120 Ace, which is pretty much the same as the Triumph T120 Black. There are some subtle differences which we're going to go into in this full review.
I've got a bit of a revelation here to make, actually, because
so the Ace Cafe Special comes with this black 4-bar Triumph badge. It also has the head down, hold on Ace Cafe little logo on the front. It comes in matte storm grey with this nice matte green stripe down it. Really like this colour. It looks really nice and blacked out. It's got a various amount of blacked out accessories. And you've also got another sticker on the side here, the Bonneville T120 Ace Cafe. And you've got minimal fenders on the back, which looks cool, but it's not quite so practical. We've just been for a little ride and the bike's very muddy, so although it looks good, it's not quite as practical.
now the wheelbase on the T120 is 1,450 millimetres, which is quite short. The rake is 25.5 degrees, that's the steepness of the forks, which is actually the headstock, but it's usually the angle of the forks as well. And the trail is quite short at 105.2 millimetres, and all those measurements combined, including the size of the wheels and etc., go towards making the typical Triumph very sharp handling. So like all Triumphs, it's a quick steering motorcycle, and you can change direction like a squirrel. It's ever so quick, and that's, as I said, a characteristic of pretty much all of the Triumphs.
So a couple of things that the T120 Black and the Ace share. They've both got blacked out rims. They've both got these twin black pea shooter exhausts, which look quite cool. And they've also got a special T120 dedicated frame and suspension setup, so you won't see this on any of the other Bonneville models. But one of the differences, the Black has got a brown seat, ironically, even though it's called Black, and it's got a black grab rail, which this doesn't have. So the T120 Black comes in at £10,600. The Ace, which we've got here, which is limited to 1,400 units, costs £11,100, and the Diamond Edition, which is limited to 900 units, costs £10,900. So the T120's got ABS, like all bikes these days. It's got a ride-by-wire throttle. It's got a torque assist clutch, which just makes the clutch feel a little bit lighter. And it's also got heated grips, which on a day like this, it's below zero, -1, -2. It's absolutely freezing, can't feel your hands. As soon as you put them on these heated grips, oh my God, it's like heaven. So this is a must-have feature.
Now, before we film our reviews, we always go for a good long test ride, and we cover all sorts of road riding, dual carriageways, towns and country lanes and what have you. So we don't always film it, but we always do it first. Riding around, one thing I noticed on this, the suspension's very good. You don't feel the bumps, so it handles that very well. And obviously we've got some bumpy roads in the countryside after the ice. There's some big potholes, and it does go through them quite well.
So there's two modes on the T120, there's rain and there's road. I think having two modes is good. Some bikes have like 5 or 6 modes, which can be a bit too much because you've got to get used to the bike in all those different modes. It's like having 5 different bikes. But this just, in rain mode, it dulls down the power a bit, makes it a bit less responsive, which is good in the rain. And then road mode, you're getting all of the bike's power. As with all the Triumphs, you have to pull the clutch in to change the mode, and the switch on this one is on the right handlebar. So when you've got the throttle on, it can be a little bit tricky to push the button, and it's hard to tell whether the button's gone in. So you have to take your eyes off the road to look at the small little screen on the dials, and then you have to pull the clutch in for it to go into the mode. The 1200cc Bonneville engine that's on this bike produces 80 PS, which is 79 brake horsepower at 6,550 RPM, and 105 newton meters of torque at 3,100 RPM.
Now, I like bikes that produce the torque lower down, and this does so, but as Darcy said, it does feel happier at higher RPM, so it doesn't feel like a low down torquey bike. But then saying that, when you come to a hill, it doesn't bog down. When you're riding with a passenger on the back, it doesn't bog down. So the torque is there, but it's a much happier bike at higher revs.
So you've got the USB port under the seat like all other Triumphs. It would be better on the headstock, like we say all the time, but it's good that you have it. It's got a mobiliser, it's got a centre stand, which a lot of people like, as well as a side stand. The stands are pretty good on Triumphs in general, and you've got a 10k mile service intervals.
Now, the brakes on this bike, you've got a double disc at the front and a single at the rear. The stopping power is very good, but I do feel you've got to really squeeze the front lever to get them to work at their maximum, more so than some other bikes. But they're okay, as I said, but you do have to give it a good old squeeze.
So the engine is liquid cooled, although it looks air cooled with these fins. That's just for styling. It is liquid cooled. The radiator's at the front, and like all the Bonnevilles and all the Triumphs, on a day like today, you can get the engine quite muddy and mucky because it is wet on the roads. That's what it's like in England. But you can get an extended mud guard, so it comes down a bit further, which would probably prevent or make it a little bit less of a problem. You've got a 6-speed manual gearbox on this bike. You've got an 18-inch front wheel and a 17-inch rear, and you've got 120 millimeters of travel on the front and rear suspension. Now the seat height is 790 millimeters, and I'm 6'1", thereabouts. This feels just right really when you're sitting on it. I don't know how it looks from an outsider's perspective, but it feels just right. And from a passenger's perspective, if you're sitting on the back, the seat's perfectly comfortable. I probably wouldn't want to go on a really long journey over 100 miles or so, but for short little journeys, it's perfectly good enough.
Now, height-wise, and in terms of how you fit on the bike, I've got a bit of a revelation here to make, actually, because if you've been watching our videos, I always say how tall we are, etc., and how the bikes fit. I decided to measure myself the other day, and actually I'm not 6'3", I'm 6'2". And I don't know why I thought I was 6'3". I suppose it's probably wishful thinking, and I haven't measured my height for years. Anyway, I'm 6'2", so this is how I fit on the bike at 6'2". It feels fine, to be honest. It's not a small bike particularly. I mean, it's got quite a short wheelbase, but it doesn't feel small to ride, and I think I look all right on it. But at least you can judge how you would look on the bike yourself. But if you're 5'10", 5'8", you'd be fine. Even 5'5", because you know, my feet are on the ground and my legs are bent, so it's not a huge bike. So it's quite versatile in that respect.
You've got a 14.5 litre fuel tank, and official figures from Triumph say you'll get 63 miles per gallon. We've been getting 56.5, but this is still really good figures. If you think about it, it's a lot more economical than most cars, so, and you get a lot more enjoyment out of it.
Now on the T120, I've noticed the fly-by-wire, it's ride-by-wire throttle. That initial squeeze where you just turn it on from nothing to something, you get a little bit of a jerk. And I find the same on my Harley Davidson. It's not as progressive perhaps in the earliest part as a cable throttle used to be. So you just get a bit of a jerk, but I believe there's a sort of some way of mapping that out. So it's not a problem, it's just a little bit like that. And maybe we noticed it more because some of the places we've been riding, it's been icy and snowy, so we've had to be a bit more careful.
The T120 weighs 224 kilograms, and it doesn't feel very heavy at all. It feels quite light, it's easy to manoeuvre, and it feels very well balanced.
Now on this you've got two analog dials, which we love analog dials. You've got your rev counter and your speed. And on the left one you've got a little digital display. It shows the time. You can scroll through on the left. Traction control, it says whether it's on or off. You've got your odometer, your trip 1, your trip 2, and your miles per gallon for trip 1 and for trip 2. So that's very useful. It also shows which gear you're in. And on the other side, you've got your fuel gauge, and it's always on, so you can see the bars going down as you go through. It says how many miles you've got till empty, I believe. And it also shows your modes when you change it on the right button on this side. Now the mirrors on this, for me, I can see probably a quarter of the road behind me, unless I move out of the way. So they'd benefit from being a little bit further out. But I suppose if you're shorter and not as wide, then you'd be fine. Now I would describe the T120 as having a classic bike feel to it. Yet at the same time you've got all the modern advantages of technology and the various things that a modern bike has. Much more reliable, of course. But it does feel like a classic bike to ride. And if you're just pootling around, it's a very pleasant bike to ride, and you can have hours of fun exploring and going around the villages and stopping off at a pub for a pub lunch and a pint of beer. Don't drink and ride. But yeah, it basically feels like a classic bike. But if you open it up, it does shift, and it really does shift. So we've pretty much worked our way through all the Bonnevilles now, and as I've said many times, I love these engines. They're superb, and they do change them between the different bikes. Depends how they're mapped and the compression ratios and that sort of thing. And in this bike, it's again a very lovely engine. There are some new Bonnevilles coming this year. We are invited to the press launch. We can't say anything about it, but watch this space because there's some good bikes coming up. Now, as I've said in previous videos, I like bench seats. A flat seat is really nice to sit on, and you can move backwards and forwards depending on what you're doing, whether you're cornering, accelerating, going up or down hills, etc. And there's plenty of room for a passenger there. Nothing worse than a scooped out seat like you get on adventure bikes. But some sort of more racy bikes, a little bit of a back is good because it stops you sliding off when you accelerate. But on this, it's just right. Now I do like the look of this bike. It's quite minimalistic. I like minimalistic things. The pea shooter exhausts look really nice. They're not that loud, and they can't be because they've got to comply with regulations. They've got the cat in them and all that sort of thing. The cat's actually down there in the middle. But you can, of course, get aftermarket exhausts for these, and they're fairly simple to change, and you can make it sound a lot louder and reduce the weight somewhat as well.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and we've got plenty of good videos to come this year. Next week we've got the BMW R18 Classic review, so make sure you check that out. Also make sure you check out our t-shirts. They're in the carousel below, and there's plenty more on the website. I'm not going to show you it today because I'm so cold, my hands are about to fall off. I do not want to take this jacket off.